So we want to continue the conversation that Larry and Ken started to just bring in a couple of other leaders and employers to talk about fair chance hiring. And consistent with the theme and where Maria started out today, we want this conversation to see beyond the typical how do you get someone in the door, but really conversations about how fair chance hiring can change a community, how people who we think we're giving a second chance to actually become change agents and leaders, and then also what's lost, right, if we don't allow people to have access to opportunity without limits. So I'm gonna start this first question to Sean Hosman. He's the CEO of Vantage, and I'm not gonna go into everybody's amazing bios, so please check that out on the app and also find them on their own websites to learn more about their work. But Sean, when we talk about fair chance hiring, we usually talk about changing individual lives. But I think your life and your work is an example of how people become change agents. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your transition to leadership and entrepreneurship and how your work creates such important pathways for individuals.
Yeah, thank you so much, JFF, for having me here. Lucretia, thank you. Ken, everybody's been delightful to hear what's been said. And if I can add anything, it's that I also am criminal justice impacted. I've been working within the criminal justice system. I own my own software companies, and I've been trying to do good work. But in the middle of that, I became an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I myself went to jail 12 times between August of 2010 and July of 2012. And when I came out the other side of that clean and sober, I had to figure out what I wanted to do, and I really realized that I wanted to get more involved in second chance hiring. One of the things I think that made it for me was that I owned my own company, and I was going through probation and going through sentencing and going to spend time incarcerated and trying to figure out what my future was going to be, which would have looked pretty hopeless in a lot of ways, but I owned my own company. I paid myself a salary. I had staff, I had clients, and nobody could tell me no. Even if I was ready to go, like a lot of our folks are, who are caught up in the criminal justice system, even if they're ready, like Larry, and they're completely ready. He got told no. I just learned about that today for the first time, had a letter in his, an envelope in his suit, and then drew back the offer. So I really believe that a lot of skill sets, a lot of skill development, a lot of entrepreneurial ownership is one of the keys to really helping our folks systemically that get caught up in that system to come out of that system and really be able to make their own way. And as we know, children of incarcerated parents are about 7 to 11 times more likely to become incarcerated, and really changing the whole pathway and the social capital raise of that entire family.
That's such a great point, Sean, and I know the work that, again, my colleague Michael Collins is leading and that we've been talking about at JFF, it's been a topic of conversation, is the difference between income and capital. And I think that you laid that out too, that as we're thinking about that impact, we also need to be making sure that people with records have access to the capital that it takes to change income and wealth. Ken, I'm gonna move over to you. Ken Kuwmaura is the Manager of Strategic Partnerships at Union Pacific. And you all are taking a commitment from the hallowed grounds of Union Pacific and trying to make sure that it touches down and changes a community. Can you talk a little bit about the place-based work that you all are doing?
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, thank you for having me. But yeah, what we have found out is that by doing some of the things that we're doing now, we are having a direct impact in some of these communities. Being associated with some of the people that we've gotten to meet during the last 3 or 4 months to learn more about second chance hiring, it's more than just us developing a pipeline in an untraditional market. We actually are helping when we put someone back into the community with a job where they can sustain a household, provide insurance, provide education, provide all kinds of other support services with the help of the community partners. We become a better employer, and we become a bigger part of the community, and that's been important for us. So now we've added that to our spiel when we go out there. It's the impact that we're making into the communities that also has us here, looking at this, this area.
And I think I get to keep adding my own commentary because these are such great points that we want to dig into, because I think another important piece is that when we think about fair chance hiring, it's almost thought of as a favor to the employer. And what you're talking about is that by you engaging people in your organization, engaging with the community, the employer gets better, that there's a benefit to the employer from this that you know how to quantify and you know makes a qualitative difference in how you show up in communities. I'm going to switch this question over to Larry. You're going to go last. So Larry, when I read your book, even though I knew the outcome, I still was like on the edge of my seat, like what's going to happen in this Arthur Andersen conversation? And then you said the envelope was there. He made a risk, which was wrong in his head, that the greater risk was hiring you. Actually, Arthur Andersen lost out. Can you talk a little bit about what we lose as a society if we are on the wrong side of that risk analysis?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think what I've been able to, you know, accomplish in my life. Ken knows I'm a pretty humble person, but what I've been able to accomplish, you know, to me is a clear testament to the fact that he made a mistake.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of companies have made similar mistakes in terms of, you know, not providing an opportunity for folks. At the point when I was sitting down with him and was looking to, you know, for this job opportunity, I was 100% a different person than the person I was, you know, when I was going to jail, in and out of jail. And I think that's what, you know, folks need to kind of understand and realize. Like once a person makes that decision to change, and they're serious about it, that old life is behind. I mean, look at Ken. I mean, to me, he's a prime example as well of someone who decided, I'm not going down that path anymore. I'm done with that, and got on the right path. And you know, him and I were talking the other day about, we had a similar experience of being, you know, I remember sitting on the step in West Philadelphia with a bunch of my friends, and we were talking about work and jobs, and I was like, you know, and this was, I'm kind of dating myself now, this is way back, but I remember saying, man, if I could make $500 a week, I'll get a job, but who's gonna pay me that? Ain't nobody gonna pay me that kind of money. And that was the mentality that I think a lot of folks had. And I just think that, like I said, there's a lot of talent that's being wasted because people aren't given a chance and given an opportunity.
Yeah.
And you know, where this country is today, I think, you know, there's an incredible need for more talent, more creativity, more intelligence, and a lot of that is being wasted away inside the prisons and penitentiaries here in this country. And I think just for businesses and companies who understand that opportunity and get out ahead of it, I think that's going to be a major benefit for them in the long run. I think they're going to see benefits from the fact that they were willing to, you know, give these people an opportunity and a chance. And I know for myself, you know, once I was given the opportunity, there was no looking back. I was like 100% like, hey, I'm going to take advantage of this, and I'm not going to do anything to screw this up. There's no way that I'm going to go back to where I was. You know, it's just, for me, it's just that commitment and that ability to change it. And Ken and I have been talking about some thoughts we've been kicking around about, you know, maybe getting companies more involved while people are still incarcerated. So, you know, let's say if you took somebody who had, I don't know, 3 or 4 years left on their sentence, and you start working with them at that point, you start educating them, you start preparing them for a real job when they get out, a real job that is gonna allow them to, you know, have a mortgage and to support their families. And again, to me, I think programs like that are, for me, it started while I was still incarcerated. I was able to kind of get into this program while I was still incarcerated and start to change so that by the time I actually got out, I was focused. I knew where I was going, I knew what I wanted to do, and I truly believed that I could change my life. And I just think that the more we can work with people while they're still inside and then provide that lead to opportunities once they get out, I think there's, like I said, to me, I think the companies that figure that out are going to have an advantage over a lot of other companies.
So Ken, what is your call to action for employers as they think about who they hire, where they hire, what level of opportunities they give people?
It's really a great question because I spend 90% of my time at the Checker Foundation talking to companies about equity and about the career ladders. Because so many times in the narrative about fair chance hiring, we're always thinking in terms of entry level. And the first thing out of most people's mouths is, oh, we have some entry level positions. And when we compare what a lot of the entry level positions are in places like the Bay Area, which is one of the most expensive places in the world to live, and New York and LA County, it doesn't transfer to livable, sustaining wages. And when we take that route, it actually shows that we're ignorant of the fact of what really drives mass incarceration and recidivism. And what really drives that is poverty. And I just want to double click on what Larry said, because Larry sat on the step as a young man and said, if I can make $500 a week and get access to that, I'm done running the streets. And the reason he mentioned me, because we had this conversation, I remember years later, and I'm 2,000 miles away in South Central Los Angeles, and I remember telling myself, if I can make $1,000 a week, I would never hang out on the corners again in my life. And the reason I know that's true is because I have a lot of friends and know a lot of people who now have life-sustaining wages, and you couldn't get those guys to hang out after 10 o'clock. They're like, hey, I'm in bed at 8, I'm going to work, my wife is at home, like, and that's really what it is. And I always use the analogy of trading places. I'm dating myself a little bit about what happens when Eddie Murphy was actually able to change places with Dan Aykroyd, right? And how he was able to thrive. And so it's really about access. So I encourage employers every single day that let's just not think about entry-level positions. Let's think about reskilling, let's think about upskilling, and let's think about placing people in positions all across the corporate ladder when it fits. I don't want people to lower the bar. I want people to lower the barriers. And if anyone's a testimony of that, it's Larry, right? And and even me from my own trajectory, and one of the things that I'm just so grateful for with Checker is when they called me, I was an executive director at a nonprofit organization in the Bay Area, just got a $30 million grant from the state of California to build out a tech reentry system. And they could have gotten anyone in this audience, anyone in the country to head their foundation in this work. And they said they wanted somebody directly impacted. They wanted somebody with lived experience. Now, I've only been out of prison 3 years. For those of you who don't know, I did almost 24 years in prison, almost 9 years in solitary confinement for reading a book about Black Panther George Jackson. And for Checker to take a chance and provide the space for proximity and proximate leadership, to lead the charge to nationalize and evangelize what we call a movement. We call this a movement to bring down the unemployment rate of people who have been incarcerated or have a record down to the national level. Right now it's about 27%, and we'd like to bring that down to 5 or 6%. That's really what I'm encouraging every person in this room and companies to think about is how can we place people in positions and position them for success? Because at the end of the day, if people have access to good jobs and economic mobility, I can assure you that 99 times out of 100, that person's never going back to prison. That person's never terrorizing the community. That person is never jaywalking, in fact, because they value, and you heard Larry say it, I knew I would never mess that up because I've been given the opportunity. At Checker, with all the fair chance employees that we have, they're so grateful. They're the first ones there. They're the last ones to leave. They're on the Zoom calls early. They love it. Our attrition rate is almost 0 over the last 5 years at Checker for people who have been given an opportunity to get inside a tech company in downtown San Francisco and participate in belonging and inclusion. And I tell people often, and you know this, Lucretia, because we talk often, for all people in here who think about DE&I, there's no DE&I strategy, that you don't have a DEI program if fair chance hiring is not the baseline of your inclusion strategy. I tell people it's almost like being pregnant. It's either you're inclusive or you're not, right? You can't be half and half. So I would just encourage everybody to think about it in those terms and not always think about it in terms of how can I get a guy to sweep out the closets or do something else that's like minimum wage type of jobs, because those things aren't sustainable over time. And when you look at the data, the longer that people are locked into a lack or denial of access to economic mobility, the recidivism rates go up. Year 3, year 4, year 5, you're locked into functional poverty and you can't get out. And so those stressors in these communities cause people to make mistakes and make poor choices, and that's something that's preventable. And it's all on us in this room and companies across the country to actually change our mindsets, right? And to open up our perspective about what's possible for people. And I encourage you to think about people like Larry, people like Sean, people like myself, when you think about that.
And I do want to bring it back, and Sean, I know I didn't have this question on your email, but I think there's also a sense of which sectors are appropriate, right? You're in tech, you're in software, you work a lot with data, and I wonder if you could just talk a little bit too about what it means to bring down those barriers of expectation for different sectors.
Two things. In the software systems or in the software industries, like other industries, I think it's fair to say that there needs to be infrastructures and consideration for what kinds of roles people with backgrounds can fill. I do work with government, actually, and I do a lot of confidential proprietary data, and I have to have safeguards in place. In one of my companies, 25% of my staff are previously incarcerated. So we've done a very good job, been very intentional, and even when we have background checks and other kind of security measures mandated by our clients who are government agencies so that their data is kept confidential. But what I want to say to the community is we've overcome those challenges. We've taken a look and been specific, and I'll get geeky for a second. You can be in our dev environment, but I can't have somebody in a production environment. You can be in my stage environment, but you can't be in my testing environment. That's not that hard to do and operate efficiently that way. The other thing I would say is that I think technology, for a lot of the things we're talking about, I happen to also teach incarcerated men and women how to be software developers while they're still incarcerated and then put them in jobs when they come out. And so I want to change the technology question a bit to say that for our communities, that's really kind of a key piece. STEM, technology, shortening that gap, Black and brown communities, underserved communities, and the cycle of incarceration. Technology is a solution in that space. Very important one.
Yep. And Ken, I wonder too if you could talk a little bit from the work that you do and how you see it changing communities. How does that change the relationships internally when hiring managers are now engaged, when team members are now engaged?
That's a great question, because you're going to face it. There's going to be somebody that doesn't believe in what you're doing. We get the stump the chump questions all the time, right? Like, so why aren't you hiring military? Why are you focused on second chance? Well, we are focused on military. This is just a new strategy, a new area that we're going to add to our talent and our pipeline. It is a change, but it starts with educating yourself, educating a few people inside your company about what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. And I learned this from Ken, the top has to be very clear on what you want to deliver and where you want to be, right? And you got to do it for the right reason. I've run across a lot of great people, great companies, but I've also run into a couple that, do it to have a sticker put on their website or something, right? People will find out right away. And so it's educating the people inside your company as well as educating other people outside the company that this is the right thing to do. There's a lot of talent out there that we're missing out on. And we're looking at things like going back in and getting some of the training done, working with some of the folks that are incarcerated while they're incarcerated, giving them some of the things, some of the testing that we do, some of the training that we do inside, partnering up with some of the community colleges, some of the technical schools to help us. It affects the bottom line. So the C-suite loves that, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy, but it's those people that work next to each other that we have to constantly educate on what we're doing and tell them why we're doing it.
And I think that's the see beyond point, right? You're not trying to churn people in and out. I can't remember which panel it was yesterday when Dr. Fuller was saying that somehow the 10 Commandments are, thou shalt have 75% turnover in entry-level work. Like, that doesn't build for an inclusive, high-performing company. and people with records are talented candidates, and you don't want to bring them into a workplace just to churn them out because the person sitting next to them wants to be all ankety about it. So I think it's really important to make sure that this is part of a larger inclusivity strategy, a larger equity and practice strategy. So with that, I wonder if we can just give our panelists an amazing thank you and round of applause for being with us today.